Hello, and welcome to Eric McElroy's American Exchange with me, Eric McElroy, of course. Thank you very much for joining us. If you're brand new to the podcast, the idea is that I, as an American based in the United Kingdom, without any idea about what's happening in my home country, dial across the pond to find out and speak to fun and fascinating people. And this week is no exception, where we welcome back to the podcast Ron Filipkowski. Ron, someone we've had on the pod before, back in November 2022 was the last time. And I really enjoy talking to Ron. For if you're a political geek, this is definitely one of the guys you want to talk to. He's a former Republican. He is a former prosecutor, so we talked about the Trump trials and what's happening there. I tried to get him to pick his favorite one that he'd like to prosecute and lawyer. He became disenfranchised with the Republican Party under Governor Ron DeSantis, so another win for Ron DeSantis on that one. And he spent the last 3 years up into the 2022 election, sort of on a personal campaign via Twitter, undercovering the far right, putting Twitter video clips, little snapshots, little things, and just showing just the rot and core at the base of that party, and has been working to not help not elect Donald Trump. When we last talked in 2022, he was basically saying that he was looking for a way to expand his work and go beyond being sort of a one-man band, and he's found that, and he's now the editor-in-chief of MeidasTouch.com, which is basically taken what he's doing and now has a number of different writers and a larger platform, and is working to show that underbelly of the far right and to help avoid them from winning power in the upcoming elections. So Ron's a great person to talk to because he's seen that inside the right. He's worked really hard and created an incredible profile on Twitter, even though he says none of us like Musk these days. Sorry. He's got over 870,000 followers on there, where he raises a profile of some of the people that are there. And it's an amazing Twitter feed because he really highlights some proper nut chops. He's also on Threads as well, and that'll be in the description, both his Twitter handle and his Threads handle. I talked about trying to get him on Instagram, but he's an old man like me, and Insta's just a step too far. It's just, I'm struggling, guys. I'm trying. I've got my daughter helping me. So it was a great conversation. If you like it, subscribe, share, do whatever you need to do. But yes, please enjoy Ron Filipkowski. I'm very pleased to welcome back one of my favorite guests to the pod. This is somebody who we last spoke to right on the cusp of the midterm elections in 2022. And the last thing that we finished talking about was the fact that he'd done all this tremendous work on his own up until 2022. And I asked him, well, what are you going to do now? And it looks like, Ron, you've been kind of busy. What's been happening?
Yeah, I think I expressed at that time my great frustration was over time because I was a full-time practicing lawyer with my own law practice that I had had for 30 years, just about. And, I really wanted to do more politics. I focused on 16 candidates, trying to take out 16 candidates in the midterms. And that's about all I could do. And with the
Okay.
presidential election coming up, I had really hoped to have more time. And I finally sort of expressed my frustration on Twitter about that. I posted about it, which I don't normally share anything personal on Twitter, but I did. And
Yeah.
a couple weeks later, the guys from Midas Touch, who's three brothers, very active politically, younger guys, very ambitious. They're good. They'd have a big podcast. They wanted to start a political website. They have a
Okay.
podcast network as well, and they wanted me to run it. They were prepared to invest quite a good chunk of money into it, hire a
Mm.
bunch of writers. They wanted me to run it and be the editor. And I just said, yeah, sure. I mean, if you're able to compensate me the same as basically what I make practicing law,
Mm.
I'll be prepared to give up my law practice. And we did. So took about 6 months to transition, get rid of all my cases, but now
Yeah.
I've been full time
Oh, wow. So it's been a
since
because
November. Yeah,
because when we finished chatting, you were kind of like, yeah, I've written a plan, and because it was just you and the two
that's right.
volunteers, and like, I'm doing everything I can, Eric. And I was like, come on, why can't you save democracy alone, Ron? And you were good. You were making a good push, I thought. I mean, because we talked about your reach was incredible for some guy that kind of came. I mean, I know you had a presence in the political scene in Florida, but
Right.
you know, your clips were getting shared globally, and the things that you were pointing out, especially with Twitter. I'll be interested to know if you've moved on from Twitter with its hijacking by Elon, but but just by highlighting the deep dark side of the far right and how it's crept into the mainstream of the right, scarily. So that's great that you found a home and a platform for it, because that's exactly what you said. So maybe at the end of this chat today, if you want to make a wish for 2024,
Mm.
maybe the wishes that you express on our podcast will come true.
All right. Yeah. It seems to be working so far, right?
I mean, yeah, we've got a perfect track record so far. But you're continuing to do the stuff you do on Twitter. Your Twitter account's feel really active, but now it's just expanded with the support you get from Midas Touch.
Right. So now we're able to, we have a team of eight people. We
Wow.
text each other all throughout the day constantly. Our phones are going off 24/7. They're in different locations. Some are in LA, one is in Arizona, one is in New York, so one is in DC, I'm in Florida. So we have different time zones as well, so we can
Right.
go late into the night, early in the morning. So yeah, we cover a lot of breaking news. I mostly cover the Republican Party. That's sort of my job with one other guy, and then we have a couple writers that more focus on the Democrats. And so yeah, and we're very interested in tracking candidates as the elections get closer. Obviously, our main focus right now has been on the presidential election,
Hmm.
but I do very much want to transition over into the congressional
Yeah.
races and Senate races as well. But those don't really get cranked up until the summer.
Yeah, of course. And I have to explain this to our British friends a lot, but what I love about the US, in a kind of a love hate, I suppose, is because there's so much money pumped into campaigns all the way down the ballot, and the campaign season goes on for so long, you get a lot of people in sort of obscure political roles that do TV ads, and sometimes they are absolutely hilarious. And what I always love showing British people are the political ads where it's usually a Republican has a gun and blows up some piece of legislation or other thing. Those are my favorite things to find.
Yeah, I always the fetishization of guns is a big Republican theme.
Yeah.
Christmas time they pose with their guns in front of the Christmas tree with their kids, all that kind of stuff. You're right. In fact, I think at least one of the ads really wrecked one major candidate's campaign, Eric Greitens,
Hmm.
who's probably a favorite to get elected as governor of Missouri, and he was the one who had assembled like an entire SEAL team in camouflage, like six guys, and they
Yeah.
all busted into a building like they were doing a raid and they were searching for liberals. And that commercial got so much backlash it might have cost him the
Hmm.
election. So yeah, you're right. Tracking the commercials is fun. But what we also do is track the events
Yeah.
that aren't covered by the press, a lot of the
Okay.
small events that they go to, because that's when they say the craziest stuff is when they're,
Hmm.
in a room with 12 people. And sometimes we can get what they're saying from people's cell phones, and they post it on their
Right.
Instagram or whatever. And those have been some of our best stuff is just small people. I just recently posted a Ted Cruz clip that was just a guy standing in the back filming it, and sent it to me. So
Hmm. I mean, and that's what you did so effectively with just the small army of people you had before. So I'd imagine now magnified, you can get even further into it, because they do say these things out loud, but there's so much to cover and so much noise. It's finding the right thing to, I suppose, highlight and making sure it's visible to everyone.
yes. Yeah, and the concept that we're doing is really a whole new approach to media. We're trying to sort of reinvent how politics is covered by the media in the United
Mm,
States. And we're doing it leaner and meaner. We're doing it remotely, no brick and mortar, but we're in constant communication. I think the way we're covering it right now is the wave of the future for political coverage. And we're seeing in the United States so many media companies go out of business.
mm,
Or we had Punch Bowl, Vice is struggling,
struggle. Yep.
and a lot of the reason is because their overhead is just so massive, and they're paying writers a fortune, and they have buildings and travel budgets and all of that. So we sort of have a whole new approach to how to do this, and nobody's really doing it the way we are, and
Mm.
maybe they will in the future.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that the thing that we talked about the last, I don't know if the last time, but I think because you've got a prosecutor's mind, because you've done that, that the way you put forward your case against these individuals it feels like, you're building that and in an evidentiary way that's showing us as viewers, because, you might not sit down and read, and I know some nice people at Vice, so, but you might not read that long article from Vice that's really is of course important reporting, and we need that kind of thing. But then these clips and these short things that get shared, that has impact.
A perfect example. I just talked to David Korn this morning with Mother Jones, who's been, he's a pretty well-known, famous writer in the United States. And both of us wrote a piece about the Ukraine Hunter Biden investigation and how it all just blew up with this Russian informant. This was fairly short and succinct, maybe like 2 or 3 pages on a Word document. And his was a very long form stuff. And he was just expressing his frustration about how difficult it is to get people to understand that subject, that particular subject.
Yeah.
And I think, yes, we're not including as much information in our articles, but it's boiled down very succinctly. And like you said, it sort of comes from being a trial lawyer, of having to make complicated subjects very simple to present to a jury. Like, how do you present DNA evidence or fingerprint evidence or something very complicated to a jury in a simple way? So that's sort of the model for what we're doing. We are not trying to be the New York Times, but we're trying to communicate substantive stuff in a very pithy, humorous, direct way. Especially, I think it's important because people have shorter attention spans these days.
Yeah. Well, because there's so much going on. I guess that's a good, I mean, the Hunter Biden scandals and the Biden impeachment inquiry that's going on in the House right now, that's not getting a lot of play in the international press. It kind of gets mentioned. Just briefly, I mean, from your perspective, it does. So they've had a witness who was the star witness that the Republicans were putting forward to say there's proof of nefarious dealings that reached all the way to President Biden. We all pretty much know that Hunter Biden has had troubles. He did some dodgy stuff. He was on drugs and everything else. He's been charged with criminal activity.
Correct.
So what's happened? What has exactly happened? They had a witness. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, the biggest problem is they had this stuff from Hunter Biden that they had gotten from his laptop and other places that showed what you said, that Hunter Biden was he was hired by Burisma, the Ukrainian energy company, to be their counsel. But basically what they were looking for is someone to help them navigate Washington, to basically lobby Washington for them. And they figured, who better than, hiring an attorney from DC whose father is the vice president, we'll hire him. And they appointed him to the board and were paying him $1 million. And so that sort of looks on the surface shady, I guess you could say, because the question is, what they need to do to get to Joe Biden, what the Republicans needed to do, is try and show that Joe Biden was getting some of the money that Hunter was getting paid, that he was kicking some of the money to his dad, and his dad was altering policy. And the main thing that they looked at is the fact that Joe Biden had gone to Ukraine back in 2014 or 15 and told the Ukrainian government that we will withhold aid to it was 2014, we withhold aid to you unless you fire your prosecutor, the chief prosecutor. Now, what the Republicans argue is that this chief prosecutor was investigating Burisma, who Joe's son was working for. So he was trying to get the prosecutor fired to help out his son's company, when in fact, the exact opposite is true. The reason why the US government and just about the UK government and just about every government in the EU wanted this prosecutor Shokin fired was because he was refusing to prosecute any corruption cases. And our aid money was getting stolen and embezzled. And what we said is, we're not giving you any more money. And the UK said this too, unless you get rid of this corrupt prosecutor who won't prosecute any fraud. So they did fire him. So that's the tie-in. And where this latest revelation comes in is the corroboration was supposedly this informant who had provided the FBI all this information that Joe, in fact, did get money and had been paid a $5 million bribe by Burisma. Okay. And now what the latest revelations has been just a few days ago is all of that information that informant had was provided by the Kremlin, was provided by Russia.
That's a good source.
It sort of unraveled the whole, it basically proved that the Kremlin was behind this entire thing. And so, the Republicans in Congress who have been pushing this Jim Jordan and James Comer, are now looking like just complete idiots. They recently deleted all the sections on their website that pertain to the information that they were using from this informant. So
Wow.
it's pretty embarrassing for them. They're trying to clean it up. They're trying to say that it doesn't matter. We still have a case without this information, but they're not fooling anybody anymore.
But you say that, but at the same, I mean, the
Well, they're
Republicans,
fooling their base.
their base. I mean, because they just impeached, is it Mayorkas, the Secretary of
Homeland
Homeland
Security.
Security,
Yep.
with not doing a high crime misdemeanor, just doing policy they disagreed with, and there were some holdouts, but eventually they found enough of these holdouts. So even now, you hear Republicans in the House go, "Yeah, we don't really like doing an impeachment of President Biden. There isn't evidence." But then when they rally and whip the votes, they'll, I mean, they usually vote anyway. They pretend to be moderate. They pretend to do these things, but then when it comes to it, they all just do what the leadership says.
Yeah, well, it's pretty clear right now that the impeachment of Biden is not going to happen. I mean, that's a dead letter. But as far as the Mayorkas goes, look, I think it's like this. If they could vote secret ballot in the House, there's no
Yeah.
way Mayorkas impeachment would have passed. The
Yeah.
only reason why many of those people voted to impeach him, which they did not want to do, is because they're afraid.
Yeah.
Because only 4 Republicans voted against impeaching him. And guess what happened? Every one of those 4 has gotten death threats, has gotten threats that people are going to run against them within their own party. They're just a big giant spotlight is put on them. So anytime you go against what Trump wants, you get put on blast in the US. They want to take you out, and it's especially dangerous for Republicans. And we saw that in the midterms when the 10, I think it was 9 or 10 Republicans voted to impeach Donald Trump because of January 6th, right? Every single one of them were targeted and went after, and only one survived. We
Yeah.
saw Liz Cheney lost, Kinzinger is out, one right after the other. Only one survived. So that's the message that they get, is that if they go against the system, somebody inside their party is going to come after them.
Which, I mean, obviously having death threats is horrific, but at the same time, if you're voted into Congress to be one of the few elite people that get to that and to the Senate, it's not really a profile and courage to go, well, if I could vote in secret, because the border bill would have passed that was put forward.
Absolutely.
The budget, well, it looks like we're on track to have a shutdown after these guys come back from their 2-week holiday. I like how they get a 2-week holiday for a 3-day weekend in the
Well, and
US.
this is coming off a couple other 2-week holidays that they took right before this. Here's how this works. Basically, when the Democrats were in control in 2022, Nancy Pelosi passed a budget, okay? And basically how that works is that is the budget of the United States until the next Congress passes a new budget. So
Yep.
so really, in theory, that budget would have only lasted for 2023 and ended.
Yes.
How it's supposed to work is the new Republican Congress comes in, they pass their own budget, and the Pelosi budget is dead. However, here we are, February, end of February, we are still operating under Nancy Pelosi's budget because the Republicans are unable to agree with each other to pass a budget. The biggest problem that we have now is not Republican versus Democrat, it's Republican versus Republican. They can't agree on anything, so they can't get anything passed with their own party. The only thing they've gotten through is Mayorkas impeachment, and that took them two tries.
But I guess because so this is a big thing I ask everybody, because it's kind of a lot of the core of what I'm doing, because I'm so far away, and well, you're in Florida, so you're still in Florida, I'm assuming. Yeah.
Yes.
So which is become a more conservative state. Is this getting through to the general public? Are they starting to see? Because most people obviously don't pay attention to politics like you or I do. Um, I'm absorbing this from afar a lot, but I'm not on the ground. Are people on the street realizing, A, we'll talk about Trump in a minute, but B, that these guys are so shitty at governing?
Yes, I think so. I think that and that'll especially come home if there's a shutdown, because that'll get major publicity, and there hasn't been one yet. Because what they do is they're past what are called continuing resolutions, which is basically like, we're just going to continue the
Yeah.
previous last year's spending levels, and we're going to kick the can down the road. And they've done that 3 times now. And so the next one is March 1st. The current continuing resolution expires March 1st, and they're not coming back in town until the Monday, which is what? Well, I don't know what the date is. Monday, 26th. So it gives them
Yes.
like 2 days to pass a budget or another continuing resolution. So, and what are they doing? They're the reason why they called that is because they held a quote unquote leadership summit
Mm.
for the Republican House leaders in Miami for the last week. So that's what they've been doing while nothing is getting done in the House. So it's very frustrating. I do think that is getting out to the American people, even though most of the people who decide elections in the United States don't really pay attention until a couple months
Yeah.
out. So, but I think the fact that what is happening in Congress, because of so many high profile things have happened, they changed speakers,
Mm.
and the Hunter Biden hearings all fell apart on them. So everything they've tried to do has completely been a clown show, really. And I think that's seeping in. I would be shocked. I would be absolutely shocked if the Republicans are able to hold on to the House in
Yeah.
next year.
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, they almost lost the House in a midterm election, which is almost unheard of for a party that's out of the presidential power. So, I mean, the fact that they did so badly, even retaining or winning the House over in 2022, just shows you that the trend isn't there. And I mean, that was led by a whole number of different things that we don't have to talk about now, because that's the past. And why look at the past to learn anything about the future? No one else does. It
Well,
doesn't
back
seem
then
like.
the issues were like vaccine COVID mandates and this and that. Yeah,
Eh,
those are long in our rear view
those are,
mirror. Thank
yeah,
God.
all problems are solved, I guess. Best not to think about. Um, I did want to ask you about something that has gotten into the media a little bit here and has been this was is CPAC, which I know you've been tweeting about and stuff, because that's one of the bigger right wing events that happens. Was that in Florida as well, or no? Is that in DC? I just wonder if since the
Oh
Republicans were in Miami, if it was near
gosh,
them.
I
But
I
I
don't
think it's
even I don't even know where it
I
is
think
this
it's
year.
usually in DC. But
That
anyway,
tells you how far it's fallen, because it used to be such a major event, and it's really not so much anymore. That
so
I don't
why?
even know
Because
where it
so this
is, and
is
I
no.
cover it.
Okay, well, everything's remote these days. It doesn't You don't have to be
Right.
anywhere. So but it was the right wing conference, and it used to be kind of considered fringe, but now it's got sort of mainstream. But is it now too mainstream? Is that why it's kind of fallen? Because you were tweeting photos of empty auditoriums, and I guess maybe it doesn't help having a guy behind the organization who's been accused of sexual assault, although the Republican presidential nominee has been found responsible for sexual assault, and that hasn't
Big
stopped his
difference.
reduction. Yeah.
This one's gay. This is a gay sexualist. And
Ah,
if Match Slap had uh, grabbed some woman inappropriately, the Republicans probably wouldn't care. But this
right.
involved young male staffers. They do care about that, Erich.
So you're saying they still have values? I'm not sure if that's what you're meant to say there. That's not what
There
you're
are
trying to say, I
some
know.
lines that they don't want crossed. Yeah.
Oh my God. Um, but so I guess so do you think CPAC has lost its power to influence the right?
Yeah, you're right. I think it was at its zenith 3-4 years ago.
Mm,
You're right. It started out very fringy. It was really like almost a think tanky where people would share policy ideas. There's not a whole lot of that anymore. And then with Trump, it went from sort of an intellectual exercise where they would bring in some writers and thinkers about policy to a show, a production,
yeah.
with all the lights and the lasers and the music. And it just became this big production. And then it became sort of a who's who, like all the big heavy hitters wanted to be there, wanted to speak, and it became that. But then what happened is a lot of other people saw that, people like Charlie Kirk with Turning Point USA, Michael Flynn, who runs
Mm,
Reawaken America, and there's all these other little tours that popped up that were competing with them for money, for dollars, and for recognition. And they've supplanted CPAC. CPAC has had financial issues. They've had a lot of people quit, and then the issue over their leader, who's in theory married, uh the worst kept secret just, came out that he may be closeted gay. And that's, again, if that was a Democrat, probably not as big a deal, but
Yeah.
in the Republican Party, being a political leader who's gay is, or who might be gay, is not good. It doesn't
Mm.
help them one bit with their members of their own party, even though they won't all necessarily openly say it. They say it behind the scenes. They don't like it.
Yeah, they oh, I've forgotten his name now. He's a senator that I met in the 90s from Washington State. And I don't know if you remember, he was arrested in I think a Minnesota airport because he was trying to touch feet with another man in the airport stalls.
Yeah,
And that was, and they had, you said, this is just insane to think of that. This is the 1990s.
I know you're talking
Um,
about. I'm
um,
drawing a blank on the name
he,
too.
but
Yeah.
it was, soliciting sex, not soliciting to pay for it, but just to initiate sex was illegal at the time in an airport or in a bathroom. And he got arrested for it because but he claimed that he touched feet with the other person in the male stall next to him because he had a wide stance when he was sitting on the toilet.
I could see his face. I can't think of his
I
name now,
I
but I
met
know
him, but
exactly who
yeah.
you're talking about.
But what's insane about
Yes.
that is that that was something you would arrest someone for in the 90s. So I
Yeah.
guess there's progress, but you'd still probably kick him out of the Republican Party now. Um, well, I guess it's good they've lost some influence because there's the far right's gained influence everywhere else. Um, Turning the focus to Trump and putting on your federal prosecutor hat, Trump has 4 criminal prosecutions against him. I think last time we talked, he didn't have any, so that there's progress. Um, if you're a prosecutor, which one of those 4 cases would you love to get your teeth into?
Oh, well, I mean, the
He's got a
most
lot to choose
dramatic,
from.
and to me the most damning case is the January 6th case, which is in Washington D.C. And where that case is right now is Trump asserted presidential immunity. What he
Mm,
asserted is that all presidents have complete and total immunity for anything they do while in office. It's not entirely clear. It's never been really addressed by the Supreme Court ever. And so leave it to Trump to sort of push the bounds of the Constitution. And so he lost that appeal at the trial court level. He lost that appeal with the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. So now he has petitioned the United States Supreme Court to take his case, and we're expecting any day now
yeah.
they're either going to say no, we're not taking the case, we're going to let the lower court ruling stand, which I
Mm,
I expect to happen.
okay.
And if so, then that case is going to get back on the trial docket. Most likely it's going to go to trial in June. If the
Okay.
Supreme Court takes the case, that's going to delay that trial until August, September at least. Okay, so that's the best case, because that's the one about him overturning the election, where he's going to have a lot of his former members of his administration are going to testify against him,
Mm,
and that's going to destroy him. If that case goes to trial before the election, Trump is toast. He is toast, because once the American public hears all the details of that, and
mhm.
we still don't know all the details because they all haven't been made public,
Yeah.
I think he's wiped out. But the question is he going to go to trial before then? The trial judge seems determined to push that case to trial,
Mm,
but Trump continues to use these different ploys to get the appellate courts to step in and delay. So we'll see. The easiest case to prove is the documents, classified documents case. The
right.
problem that case is just open and shut. He has no defense to that case. The
Mm,
problem with that case is it's assigned to a judge that he appointed right before he left office, Aileen Cannon. She is clearly 100% on his side, and
mm,
she, from day one, has been doing everything she can to bend over backwards to help him,
yeah.
whether it's ruling on motions in his favor, delaying things. She seems absolutely determined to get this delayed until after the election. So the big question there is the government at some point going to file a motion to try and disqualify her, to kick her off the
Mm,
case? That's very difficult to do. But so we're all watching that. So those are the two. But the case that's probably going to go to trial first is the one in New York, which
yep.
is the hush money payment to Stormy Daniels out of campaign funds.
Hmm.
That's probably the most difficult case to prove, the shakiest case. And unfortunately, that case is going to go to trial. So I think
Yeah.
that has all of us worried. The fact that the
Mm,
weakest case is going to go to trial first, because if he
yeah.
actually wins the first case, you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to, public opinion is going to turn against some of these prosecutions. And then the final case, of course, is the Georgia case, which involves him trying to pressure Georgia election officials to switch votes, change votes, add votes to his tally. It's on tape. That case, I think, is pretty open and shut also. The problem with that is the prosecutor in that case is embroiled in a scandal where
Mm,
she hired someone that she was having an affair with to help her
yeah.
prosecute the case, and paying him out of taxpayer funds. And the issue is, basically whether she hired her boyfriend,
Yeah.
and whether that's ethical. So we're expected to have a judge's ruling on that any day as well. It could come today, as far as whether she's going to be
Okay.
disqualified from the case, which could gum that up as well. So that's where we stand with all four.
That's brilliantly put. I mean, we've all watched a lot of legal TV shows like Suits and so on, so we know they're all sleeping with each other. And I'm not going to ask you when you were prosecutor who you were sleeping
Oh, it's
with.
it's
I'm
very
gonna.
common, and I mean, what's very common as far as prosecutors' offices is female prosecutors date police officers. It's very, very common in our
Okay.
legal system to see female prosecutors dating cops, and dating each other, inside the
Yeah.
male and female prosecutors dating each other as well inside the office. But as far as the elected prosecutor, that person is not supposed to be, the person in charge is not supposed to be sleeping with any of the employees. And
Yeah.
and what also hurts her a little bit politically is the fact that during her campaign, she denigrated prosecutors who did that. And she said, I will
Uh,
never, because she was single. So
right.
she was asked one time, would you ever date somebody? And she said, absolutely, I would never do that. That's not ethical.
Yeah.
So that's
Uh,
not a matter of whether that would affect the case at all. It's just her
yeah.
next election she could have some difficulty.
But I mean, for the strength of the Georgia case, if she does get taken off, so by the time this goes out, because we're recording on a Friday, this goes out on a Monday, she might be gone, for example. Does that mean that case is gone?
That's the big question, which is there's a difference of the differences of opinion on that.
Okay.
Some, obviously, the Trump camp believes, no, that means it has to start all over. He has to be re-indicted.
Mm,
Charges are thrown out. Everything has to start over with a new prosecutor. Others believe that the judge, even if he disqualifies her, I don't believe he will, but even if he
mhm.
disqualifies her, it just may be that there's like six prosecutors working on that case. It's not just the guy that she brought in.
Yeah.
So it might be just that he can't do the case, she can't do the case, but the other ones can.
Okay.
And the case will continue to move forward. So I think it's either going to be one of those two. I think it's either
Mhm.
the judge is going to say, look, this is all very shady, but it has no effect on the case.
Yep.
I'm not stepping in here. Or the judge is going to say, okay, I'm disqualifying them, but the case can continue. The third scenario, I think, is very unlikely, starting the case all over. And the other interesting thing is I've listened to all the hearings on this,
Mm,
and the judge is a Republican judge appointed by the Republican governor of Georgia,
yep.
white guy. So it's like the Trump people cannot claim that he's biased politically like some of the other judges.
Yeah.
He's part of their party. he's a
Mm,
he's a white male Southern Republican. You
yeah.
know.
Well, that won't stop them from disqualifying him, Ron.
Well,
Reality
they'll still
and
attack him. Yeah.
saying, yeah, they'll attack him.
But
Yeah.
it won't
Um,
stick as well as it will with some of the other judges, who are Democrats.
Yeah. Now, I've listened to some of that court case as well, because even though I am a comedian with a degree in drama, that's how geeky I am. And I mean, I found it quite interesting. And he seems pretty fair and balanced. And I mean, it's amazing how dull listening to a court case can be, which I guess that's when, because, the TV highlights are very quick and snappy and exciting, but there's a lot. I liked that a lot of, was it last week? They were like, so have you got that witness? No. Okay, well, they're not here yet. I'm like, democracy is getting decided right now. Can't you get this person fucking here? I'm like, man, he's got a doctor's appointment now. We didn't realize.
That was the boyfriend's divorce lawyer who they were struggling to find at one point. But you're right. I mean, a lot
Uh,
of court cases, that's what it's all about. It's a lot of mundane stuff. And I think the best trial lawyers are the ones who avoid that stuff, who are able to
yeah,
present their cases very quickly and succinctly and not repeat themselves. But a lot of lawyers, they think they get paid by the word. They love to hear
yeah.
themselves talk. So, but it
Well,
bores a jury.
and apparently there's around, God knows how many million Americans that are willing to fund this by giving money to Trump, which he's using to pay his lawyers, which is just, I mean, do you think at some point Trump because he's been using campaign contributors to pay legal fees in court cases like this, which is unheard of. I mean, there
Never,
cannot
never
be any
before.
other example of this, especially at the where the well, we as far as we know, it's at $50 million, which is gonna be more if it is more already. I mean, do you think that will, because you were a Republican, you were in the party, you know some of these people. At some point, don't you think they would be tired of funding his criminal defense?
Yeah, so much money is being directed to Trump's lawyers that should be going to politics.
Yeah,
Like you just said, $50 million he spent in 2023 on lawyers out of his campaign. He can't use his exact campaign account. He can use the political action committee funds, his PAC funds, which is sort of the same thing in this country.
yeah,
So yes, but it's a zero sum game. I mean, he has X amount of money. He can either spend it on campaign ads and a ground game and grassroots, or he can spend it on lawyers. And unfortunately for him, and that's the frustrating part for him and for the Republicans, is he's spending it all on lawyers. Now he could take what he should do. What he could do is take it out of his own pocket. He's supposed to be worth, you know, so many billions of dollars he claims. So why isn't he paying any of his lawyers out of his own pocket? They're his
yeah.
lawyers, but he's not doing that. He's not spending a dime out of his pocket. So you would have to think smart Republicans are getting frustrated
Hmm.
because they've got to be wondering how much is he going to have left while Joe Biden continues to amass this huge war chest of hundreds of millions of dollars, and he's going to unleash hell
Yeah.
on Donald Trump in the throughout the summer and fall. Will Donald Trump have any money to be able to respond?
Well, and I mean, and if he's successful with his takeover of the RNC, which controls a lot of the money that goes to other Republican candidates, the Republican National Committee, and he's got his daughter-in-law in one of the positions of power who's already said the money's going to go to Trump, that's going to, I mean, as a Democrat, great. Don't, because that money normally goes down to down ballot people to get it to win Congress and win the Senate and win the state legislatures and the state governorships and all that stuff. So fine, spend all the money on the lawyers. That's brilliant.
The way the RNC, is the national party, and the way it's supposed to work is they're supposed to not favor any particular
Yeah.
one candidate over another. They're supposed to sit down and go, here's how can we win the House? How can we win the Senate? How can we win the presidency? Where do we need to allocate dollars? We're not going to spend money over here because that's a safe seat. But this election over here is a close race. The Montana Senate race is 50-50. So we're gonna put 5 million in here. So they sort of divvy it up around the country, governor races, Senate races, House races, presidency, who they're going to help. And generally they don't give any money to the presidential candidates because
Yeah.
they have the most money. They're supposed to be self-financed. They're not supposed to look to the RNC. It's supposed to be what you said, the down ballot people. So now what you have is Trump taking over the RNC by
Hmm.
installing his daughter-in-law, who has said all of the money is going to go to Trump. So if you're a congressional candidate in Arizona or Illinois or wherever,
Yeah.
and you're in a close race and you're counting on getting $1 million from the national party to help you out, you're not getting it. And it's because it's all about Trump now. So, but again, they're too afraid to complain. No, none
Yeah.
of them are. No, they're all upset, but none of them will say that openly.
Yeah. Which I guess in that case, we can take that as a win and let them spend the money on his lawyers. That's a good thing. Um, I don't want to keep you too much longer because you've been so kind with your time as always. I held back on this because I know this might be an emotional question to ask you. And your fellow Ron, your current governor of Florida, has come out of the presidential race. Ron DeSantis. How are you coping okay with that? Because I know how close to your heart. that he was. So how are you, I mean, you're not at all surprised by that, are you? Because you know the guy, you've been governed by him, and I think works. I don't know directly with him, but I know
I
within his
was
government
I
and
was
stuff.
appointed by him, yeah, to an
Yeah,
office. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So are you at all surprised? Because everybody that I talked to, and maybe you were one of them, I can't remember now, all said that he would make a terrible nationwide candidate, and he proved to be one.
Yeah. So he really wrecked himself by doing this. I mean, he's a young guy, he's 42 years old.
Wow.
Obviously Trump is going to run again. And the smart play for him was to wait
Mm,
until 2028 when, Trump in theory would have endorsed him, supported him if he's still alive and still out of prison, well, both of which are highly questionable. But the point is that Trump supporters would have gone to DeSantis. There was no
yep.
question that they viewed him as sort of the number two. But when he decided to run against the king, the cult leader, he burned his bridges with so many of them. And
Mm,
so many of them will never forgive him for that. They view that as a betrayal, as treason, the fact that he ran against Trump, and Trump hates him now. They despise each other. The campaign got very personal. DeSantis was saying that he was in cognitive decline, that Trump had lost his mojo. He was too old. It got very nasty and personal towards the end. So the point is, DeSantis was never. Nobody thought, except for maybe him, that he was going to beat Trump.
mm,
But what he did is he damaged his brand. He damaged himself for the future. And
yeah.
as a 42-year-old rising politician, it made no sense. It was just incredible bad judgment on his part to run. I still don't know why he ran. I think he was convinced that he was going to beat Trump, or Trump was going to go to jail and be taken out some other
Yeah.
way. I think maybe he still thinks that because he's still running around sort of acting like he's still running, even though
Really.
he's not. I think he's still hoping in the back of his mind that, Trump goes to prison in June and the party will seek him out to rescue them.
Yeah. I don't think he has a chance until he can learn how to smile. I mean, he was so untelegenic, which is a huge, big. That's a big thing right now. I mean, Joe Biden should, on any metric of measuring what he's done, be running away with this election. But because he comes across on television as old, because he is, and not a spry old person, that's why I think this election is in the balance. I mean, because
Yeah,
he's governed effectively.
he has all these incredible things that he's accomplished. He's gotten past more than any president probably since Lyndon Johnson in the 1960s as far as a legislative agenda, just a sweeping agenda. The economy is humming along, especially compared to countries in Europe, even China. We're outpacing every country in the globe in economic growth, low unemployment, inflation has come down dramatically. Everything is humming. The problem is, yes, what you just said is that Joe Biden is probably physically incapable of going out around the country and doing multiple events every day to defend his record and to promote himself. He's just
Mm,
not somebody that seems to be able to do that anymore. And that's probably one thing that's going to hurt him. So it has to be his surrogates, have to do that for him.
yeah.
And I think that the amount of money that he has, stored up in his war chest, it's just going to be a carpet bomb of ads, this
Mhm.
summer and fall. I guess the only question is, how do people get their information now? Do TV ads really work as well as they used to in the past? One interesting thing is the campaign just got on TikTok, and so I think that they're very smart. They're looking for alternative ways to reach voters besides traditional ways.
Yeah.
And he's gotten a lot of criticism for being on TikTok because the policy of the US government is not to use TikTok at all.
Yeah.
But his campaign is using it, which is
Yeah.
smart because it's reaching young voters.
Yeah. I mean, I've done my part in that 18 and a half years ago, we had a child and she has just turned 18 this month. And so she can vote. So I grew a new Democratic voter. I
Amazing.
mean, that's the kind of dedication to the party.
We need to do this more.
It's
Because my kids are mostly I have 3 Republicans and 1
Oh,
Democrat, so among my kids. So yeah.
they're still
I
Republicans even after all the work you've done in the last 3 years?
yeah, they think I'm crazy. Yeah, they think I've lost my mind. Yeah. We don't
Oh
we
my
don't
God.
we're like one of many American families since 2016 with Donald Trump where we no longer discuss current affairs or politics on
Wow.
holidays because things have just gotten so ugly and nasty in the United States, over politics that families don't talk about it anymore.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, well, maybe we can do like a swap because I've got my mother's husband there.
Yeah,
He's quite pro Trump. So we could do some family exchanges over the holidays next time
sure.
around.
Sounds
That's
good.
brilliant. Well, one quick thing I'll ask you before we go, if you don't mind. Over the weekend, after we record this, of course, so we won't know. What do you think the South Carolina primary, where Nikki Haley, the last woman standing against Trump, she's going to lose? We can
Yes.
safely make that prediction.
Yeah.
Do you think she stays into Super Tuesday with all the shit that Trump's up against? Because she's got the
Yeah,
money still coming in, isn't it, for her? And that's what matters to keep you going.
that's it. The money's still coming in. I mean, it's not like she's going to drop out and Trump is going to choose her as a running mate. That's not
Yeah.
happening. So, what does she have to lose at this point? What does she have to gain? I guess would be another question, but I'm not really sure what her thought process. I mean, she just gave a press conference earlier this week where she announced that she is going to stay in until Super Tuesday, and
Yep.
and that's the thing that really aggravates the Trump campaign because Super Tuesday is like the primaries of 20 states. It's
Hmm.
huge, mostly the southern states.
Yep.
And Trump is going to have to spend now. See, if she had dropped out after South Carolina, and she's going to lose by like 25, 30 points. If she drops out after South Carolina, Trump doesn't have to spend any more money now until
Yeah.
the summer. He's good. He doesn't have to worry about that. But with Haley staying in, that's going to force him to spend money that he does not have. He's going to have to continue to fend her off because he doesn't want to even take a chance that she could win a state or two.
Mm.
So she is hurting him just by staying in, and I think that's one reason why a lot of her contributions are coming from Democrats is because Democrats understand that she needs to stay in to hurt Trump. That's beneficial to Democrats.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I mean, he'll be spending money on his lawyers, even if he wasn't spending money on the race. But yeah, you're right. It makes him stay focused in there. And well, I mean, I mean, I can see why if I were, I mean, she must realize at this point, especially after he's attacked her and her husband for being a serviceman. You can't, I mean, because the way Ron DeSantis pivoted, said, "I won't bend the knee," and then a week later bent the knee. For her to do that as well, but I mean, I don't know. They do it so quickly. It's astounding.
I can't see it, and DeSantis didn't do much. The only thing he did was say, "Yes, I'll support Donald Trump," and that's it. He didn't
Yeah.
run and appear with him. They haven't shook hands. They haven't they haven't been together. They haven't had a phone call. So he did the bare minimum. I expect Haley would do even less than that whenever she drops out. So
Yeah.
so that's a big difference between Tim Scott or Vivek Ramaswamy, who are campaigning for Trump actively in these
Yeah.
states. DeSantis is not doing that. Okay. So there's no love lost between the two of them. And I just wrote an article today for Daily Beast actually
Hmm.
about who he's going to pick for a running mate. And
Okay.
he was asked this at the town hall the other day and he rattled off a list of names that Laura Ingraham did. And my pick was not on that list, but that's a list she chose, not him. My pick
Right.
is Elise Stefanik, who I've been predicting for 2 years that Trump was going to
Wow.
choose her. And I watched her last night. She was on Kim Guilfoyle's podcast. Elise Stefanik was last night, and
Oh God.
of course,
Yeah.
Guilfoyle is engaged to Trump's son. So
Yeah.
um, it was every time I watch Stefanik at any Trump event, including that podcast, I'm more
Hmm.
convinced than ever she's his pick
Wow. Because she's a Republican congresswoman who was
from New
considered
York.
fairly moderate and reasonable from New York, and she's gone full mega Trump cuckoo land.
Correct.
Wow.
She was somebody in see Trump's biggest weakness is suburban women, white
Mm.
white women in the suburbs that are
Yep.
generally moderate. they hate Trump, and Trump got killed in that demographic in 2020. He did okay with them in 16, got wiped out in that demographic. So I believe he wants to choose the Republican woman who best speaks to them, which was Elise Stefanik. Her whole record in Congress was built around electing women and appealing
Mm,
to women voters and moderating messaging to appeal to women. But you're right. Ever since she decided she wants to get Trump's attention, she's gone hard right in the last 2 years.
yeah,
And so what the thing about her that would appeal to those voters is something that's in her past.
yeah,
It's not in her present, but we'll see. But I do think when you stack her up against all the other names that are out there, she's just the one that makes the most sense to me.
yeah. No, I can see that. Although I would enjoy the vice presidential debate with her and Kamala Harris, because I think Kamala would eat her lunch.
It will be really, really nasty. That will be that will be nothing like the Harris Pence debate,
Yeah,
where there was laughing and some camaraderie, and they were actually pretty polite to each other. That a Stefanik Harris debate will be ugly.
yeah. I wonder if there'll be a fly in Elise Stefanik's hair. There was a fly in Mike Pence's hair. That's why I'm saying that. So,
I
which
think
Ron remembers.
two things Stefanik said in the last week to please Trump, because she's competing for this position. She wants it badly.
Yeah,
And so she keeps pushing, going further and further out on the limb to make Trump happy so he'll pick her. But in doing so, she's destroying her own credibility.
yeah.
The two things she said in the last week, which I think is going to kill her, is one, she said the January 6th defendants who have been sentenced to prison for beating up cops are hostages and should be freed. And she was asked, would you, if you had been vice president on January 6th instead of Pence, would you have certified the election? She said she would not have certified
Yeah.
the election. Those two things are going to hurt her with voters if he does choose her as the running mate.
But he has to choose a running mate that says those things.
Well, she's the only one that's gone that
That
far.
far. Yeah.
In other words, all of them said, yes, the election was stolen. We agree with you
Yeah.
on that. And we agree that January 6th wasn't as bad as what the Democrats say. But none of them have gone as far as Stefanik. Stefanik is basically pushed all her, like a poker player, pushed all her
Mhm.
chips into the table and is betting her whole career on becoming Trump's running mate and winning.
Yeah.
And so she's burned her boats behind her, like Cortez did when he landed in Mexico to conquer the Aztecs. He burned his boats on the beach to say to his men, we're not going back, we're going to win or
This is it.
die. And that's what Stefanik is doing right now. She's going to win, or her political career is wrecked.
I can know which way I hope that goes. but but right. Thank you so much for coming on, Ron. I love catching up with you, and the work that you're doing is great. So MidasTouch.com, is that the place to go to see most of what you're doing these days, in addition to Twitter?
At my name on Twitter. I'm also on Threads now, but I'm at
Ah, yes.
Ronald Filipkowski, my full name, on Threads.
Okay.
And Threads is great. That's the alternative to Twitter,
Mhm.
because I can't stand Musk. Don't like Musk. I think Musk
Yeah.
is a major problem for the world. And so a lot of us are trying to build our Threads account, which of course
Mm.
is Zuckerberg, which is not
It's a different billionaire.
not a lot better, but better. And so all of us, I think, are trying to build our Threads accounts, hoping that if
Okay.
anything really bad happens to Twitter, we have another place to go.
And how's your Insta doing? How's your Instagram?
Oh, I don't post anything on Instagram. I'm on Instagram, but I'm only on Instagram because I follow a lot of the members of Mar-a-Lago, a lot of the people,
Oh,
especially
right.
women that hang out there and get all dressed up, and so a lot of the funny pictures that I get that I post on Twitter from behind the scenes at Mar-a-Lago come from my Instagram, where I'm following all the hundreds, and I follow people who work at the golf course. I follow people, the cooks in the kitchen. I follow waiters and waitresses. I follow hundreds of people that hang out at Mar-a-Lago to get the behind the scenes stuff. So that's the only thing I do on Instagram.
I'm trying with the Insta, but again, that 18-year-old that I created with my wife's help, I do it wrong. So if you start doing it, just watch out because it's easy. You use the filter anyways. But well, great. We'll check that out, and I'm on Threads as well, trying to make my way through that too. But I will see you there, and I'll see you on Twitter, and hopefully see you again. Thanks so much.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me.
So there we go. That was Ron. Thank you so much once again to him for coming on. I got through all the things I wanted to ask him about. I wanted to see what he thought as a prosecutor, what cases he'd like to try, and he wanted to get his teeth into the juiciest one, which is prosecuting Trump for the insurrection, which is fair enough. Also, it'll be interesting to see how things played out. By the time this goes out, you may know whether or not Fani Willis was found not to be eligible to continue prosecuting the case in Georgia. I hope that she can stay on the case. I mean, she's clearly made a mistake of judgment on a personal level, but I think, the legal case is strong and it would be really disruptive to have her thrown off. So I'm hoping that she hangs in there. We'll know by the time you're probably listening to this. And again, getting the inside scoop because he knows Ron DeSanctimonious. I almost said Ron DeSantis. To see what Ron thought about Ron was also really insightful as well. So again, if you haven't already, follow Ron on Threads, follow him on Twitter, check out the Midas Touch because they do incredible work just showing the underbelly of the right and everything that they're doing there and giving the evidence that the American people need to understand who they're electing in 2024 and what these guys are really all about on the far right. So thanks again, Ron, for coming on. And thank you for listening. Of course, please share it and subscribe and let us know if there's anyone that you'd like me to try and get on the show. That is always fun to hear from you. And we will be back next time. So thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.